Welcome to the Sysadmin Show. This is the podcast that explains everything sysadmins do and the technology they work with. I'm your host, Dustin Rearbrook, here to give a jumpstart to your IT career. Today's show is episode 28, in the lab with pfSense and Open Vpn. Well, hey everybody, welcome back. And I want to start out today's show with a couple of notes about just some thoughts I've been having lately. When you're learning something new, when you're trying to continue in your working on your technical skills or continuing your career path, there are no shortcuts. It takes time to learn new skills, and I've really been thinking about this a lot lately and trying to figure out how I could shortcut the system. And I've discovered that there are no shortcuts. It takes time to learn new skills. It takes time to improve workflows. I think about it and okay, I say, I want to end up here. Can I just skip steps 3, 4, 5, and 6 and jump right to step 7? And I haven't found a way to do it. If you have any secret formula out there, shoot me an email and let me know. I have not found a way to do it. I have to start on step 1 and then continuously improve. Step 2, step 3, step 4. I have to just continually improve the workflow, learn new skills a little bit at a time. I want to say that knowledge is really important. Reading up on material, going through classes, learning more knowledge about a particular skill or activity, but there is no substitute for hands-on experience. And that's what we're going to get into here today. Today's show is going to be working with pfSense once again. And we did, I believe, an episode back in the lab in episode 10, when we kind of introduced pfSense and talked about some of its benefits. And we're going to be talking about how we can use pfSense to run an Open Vpn server. And that's going to allow us to connect back to resources, network devices at our home network when we are away from home. And the main use case I have for this is recently I was helping my father get set up with some security cameras. He wants to keep an eye on the house when he's not around, and I've been wanting to do the same thing for quite some time. I used to have back in the day I had 5 or 6 cameras set up using Blue Iris. I don't know if you've ever heard of Blue Iris, but it's basically a camera, like a home camera management server where you point all the cameras at that server, it records, and you can then present that server out into the public IP, give it a public port on a public IP. Then you can use a mobile app to view those cameras and review the recordings. And that was great, but I don't trust that method anymore. No longer with today's hacking climate. I don't trust any device like that, I guess I'll say, because some things have to be in the public network, like email servers, but I don't trust a device like that to be on the public internet. So I'm going to hide it. I'm going to protect it behind a VPN network so I can still get to it on my devices, but it's not just hanging out there in an open port for hackers to sniff and try to attack. All right, so let's take a look at this. What do we need to do first? We log into our pfSense dashboard, and I'm going to assume that you've got pfSense up and running. If not, go back to episode 10 and follow along and get that installed. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. All you need is a spare computer, and this is actually a relatively low powered computer that I have running here, an AMD E1-1200 APU. I mean, this is a very slow little computer, but it works great for pfSense. It doesn't take a ton of power. It has enough power to run at least 100 megabits, which is all I have here for my home internet connection downstream. What we need to do once we have pfSense installed, and this is the config I've used for a while, but it's pretty plain. The only thing I've added to this at this point is some interfaces, and I'll show you that here. If I go to my assignment interfaces and then click on VLANs, and anybody who's following along and does not know, these lab episodes I also release as YouTube videos. So if you do want to follow along with this and actually make these changes and are looking for a visual, I'll have a link to the YouTube video on the show notes at sysadminshow.com. So here I have VLANs. My interfaces are, I have two network cards in this computer. I have the WAN, which is my RE0, and then I have a LAN, which is RE1. So I only have two physical network interfaces, but I want to create multiple, and I have created multiple networks. And we do that with VLANs. Already in previous configs, I had set up a public network, a lab network, and just recently I created this security network. And all I did to do that was click on Add, picked the LAN interface, gave it a VLAN tag. VLAN tag is a unique number that's not the same as any other VLAN. And you can see right here, it's between 1 and 4094. So I like to go by hundreds just to kind of give some space in between. I picked 400. You can pick any number you want. And in the description, I wrote security. Let's go back to VLANs, and you can see my security one is there. And then under interface assignments, I then assigned that security VLAN. When you click on security, I need to enable the interface. I'll check that box now. And I assigned it a static IPv4. And if you scroll down, you can give it an IPv4 address. This again can be anything you want as long as it's not publicly addressable. You want this to be an internal IP address. And you don't want it to be the same as one of your other networks. So in a typical home network, you're going to have 192.168.0.1 as your primary IP for your home network. So make this something different. All right, we can leave. This was by default a /32. I made it a /24. That gives me between 1, well, 1 is used by the router itself, but it gives me between .2 and .254 as possible devices on the network. And that could, that's 253 cameras or security devices. That's plenty for my purposes. So leave all that alone. Hit save. And it warns me that it's been changed and I need to apply changes. Hit apply. It also asks if I want to make a DHCP server range. I don't need DHCP. I'm going to have all of my devices be statically assigned if and when I put them on here. All right. So that was just some due diligence there. Now we have a security VLAN. So I'm going to recommend that any devices you put on this network that are security cameras be on a dedicated VLAN, separated out from your home network or your public network, anything else that you're doing on your LAN. Let's get into creating this Open VPN connection. The first thing we need to do under System is go to Cert Manager. And the VPN technology is going to be secured partially by public key crypto. It's going to be using certificates. So we need to create a CA, a certificate authority. pfSense has that functionality built in. And that's going to let us sign our own certificates. So let's give this thing a descriptive name. We'll call it the pfSense CA. And it's going to be an internal certificate authority. Key length at 2048 is fine. SHA-256 is fine. Lifetime is up to you. I think 3650, I think it's around 10 years. 3,650 days. And we can leave everything else the same. We do not need to fill in. I don't think we need to even fill in the country code. Let's see if it forces it. It does not force it. So I see no reason to fill all that in since it's a privately held certificate. Just keep it simple. All right, we have that. And now we can click on certificates. And now we already have a certificate that was created by pfSense automatically since a lot of times we are connected with HTTPS. So let's go ahead and make a new one. Add certificate, create an internal certificate. We're going to give it a name. And this one I'm going to call Home VPN. Might as well. No reason to call it anything else. And we're going to use that certificate authority, that pfSense CA we just created. Again, we leave the key length and the digest algorithm alone. The lifetime, we leave it alone. We do need a common name here. It does not matter what you put in this common name. You can spend a lot of time thinking about it. It does not matter. So I'll just put in house.local just for fun. Again, I don't think we need anything under country code or any of that other stuff, the organizational units. All right, this needs to be a user certificate. That's important. I think we can hit save. Perfect. We now have our user certificate. Now we are going to need a certificate is only half of the authentication we're going to use. When we set up this VPN connection, we're going to do certificate plus local authentication. So we're going to have the certificate on the device that we want to connect to VPN. We're also going to put in a username and password on that device. So that's otherwise known as two-factor authentication. It's much more secure, and we want to be as secure as possible, or at least as secure as reasonable. And this is not going to be very difficult. So if we could click back on System, go under User Manager, we can click on Add and make a username. So I will make my username Dustin because I can, and pick a nice secure password. Hopefully I typed those the same. We don't really need a full name or expiration date because we don't want this to expire. We don't need to make them a group of anything, but we do need to add them a certificate. So if we click to create a user certificate, pfSense CA. Oh, you know what? I think I did this wrong this time. No, where do I do this? This was getting me last time too. Well, let's go ahead and do this. Click to create a user certificate, and then descriptive name. Let's call it Open VPN, and hit save. We can leave this SSH keys and IPsec pre-shared key blank. All right, I don't want LastPass to save that. I'll ignore that pop-up. And I'm just going to go back in and edit that really quick just to see if there's an option. Okay, there is. So I did not need to do that last step there because I already had the certificate. So I could say import an existing certificate, and I could have picked choose an existing certificate, sorry. And I could have picked my home VPN certificate right there and kept the name Dustin on it, hit save. That would have sufficed. So I kind of did some duplicate work there. I could have either made it ahead of time like we did, or you can actually make the user certificate as part of setting up the user. You can pick which one you want. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the one that I made during the user setup. Get rid of Dustin's certificate there. And if I go back to my system, I'll clean that up just so it's not a mess. If I click on certificates, I can see I have two user certs here. I don't need them both. I'm going to get rid of Dustin. So now we're ready to actually set up Open VPN. And you'll do that under the VPN tab. Click on Open VPN. And we want to go right to the wizard. This makes it really easy. Right out the gate, by default, local user access. That's what we want. Hit next. And we're going to use our pfSense CA to set up the connection. Say next. We're going to use our home VPN to set up the connection. Say next. And now we are VPNing into our WAN interface. That is typical, but not required, not necessarily the only way to do it. So they give you an option, but WAN is what we want. And we're going to leave a lot of this stuff default. Now I had 2091 in here. I think it picked that because I was using that in a previous config. 1194 we'll put in there. That is the default port. There's not really too much of a reason to use a different one. It's potential that since it's a known default, that people trying to hack into VPNs are going to be scanning for that port more than others. But this port's going to be pretty locked down, so I don't see a huge reason to change it. But if you do change it, you're just going to want to make sure if you are manually entering that somewhere else, that you're aware it's a non-default port. All right, we can leave the description as home. That's fine. Leave all these defaults. 2048-bit parameter length is good. Encryption algorithm and AES 256 CBC is good. SHA-256 is good. I don't have any hardware acceleration technology. I'm going to leave that as is. All right, tunnel network. And again, this is pulled in. I deleted my previous configs. I was not expecting it to repopulate my config with what I had put in previously. So these are going to be blank for you. But this is the first decision that you need to make. You need to pick an IP address, a network that you're going to put your VPN clients, your people who VPN in on. So when they connect, they're going to get an IP address from your pfSense box, but it can't be the same. You don't want it to be the same as your production network for security reasons. So I like to pick the 10.0.40.0/24 network. So the first person to connect would most likely be 40.1 or 40.2, something like that. So that's what I'm using. It doesn't really matter as long as it's, again, not the same as any other interface and not a publicly routable interface or IP address. You want it in the 192.168 subnet, the 10. Subnet, or the 172. Subnet. So like here, for example, I was having this under the local network. I was having this route to the 172.16.16. So I was actually having this go into what I believe was my lab network, or possibly my public network. I'm going to change this. So I want this to go into my new security network, which was 10.10. What did we make that? 0.0? I do not remember. Let's leave it like that for now, and we will come back and change it if we need to. But this is the target local network that you want this to have access to. All right. All right, concurrent connections. We leave that blank for unlimited, no compression. And this is actually kind of important. Duplicate connections. So by default, you cannot have, with that one username that I set up, that Dustin username and password, you cannot have multiple connections from that one account. It's going to say you're one person, you're only allowed to connect one time. Well, if you've got a phone and maybe you've also got an iPad or some sort of tablet, maybe you want to connect in more than once simultaneously from multiple devices, or maybe if you are doing security cameras, maybe you want to have one and somebody else in your family wants to have one. So I see no reason not to check that box. And in my use cases, I want more than one simultaneous connection, and I don't want to create multiple usernames, even though I could. And I don't see a reason to in a home setting. I'm going to keep going down here. Topology is pretty important, but we're going to leave it default. So if we do subnet, that means that everybody that's on the VPN has access to each other. And that doesn't really help us in this scenario. It would actually be a little bit more secure to put them on a net 30, and they would all only have access to themselves and the new network. But we're trusting everyone who's on this network, so there's no reason to lock it down and maybe cause some additional network issues. So let's leave that default. If this was, for example, a public Wi-Fi and we were doling out IP addresses, we would probably want to do something closer to isolated. There's actually features just for that where the various Wi-Fi clients cannot talk to each other. They can just get out to talk to the router and get out to the internet. All right, DNS server. I'm going to actually change what I had on here from before and make this 8.8.8.8 for Google DNS and 8.4.4 for the secondary Google DNS entry. And that's it. We can hit next. All right, and this is opting to automatically create firewall rules and Open VPN rules through the pfSense firewall. We want to say yes to that. That's going to basically, we don't have to do any configuration. We can go look at what it creates later, and we can click finish. All right, we now have successfully configured the Open VPN service on this router. Really quick, check that interface. Did I give that IP correctly? I did not. I made it 10.10.10.1 for some reason. Extra confusing. So let's go back in and fix that service. The network I want to route into is 10.10.10. And .0, because it's the entire network, and /24 is the network mask. Okay. Now we should be good to go. So let's take a look at, really quick, the rules that were created automatically for us. Under our firewall, let's take a look at NAT, outbound, and see if there's any NAT rules that were created as a result of this. 1-to-1. I don't think there are any NAT rules. That were created directly as a result of this. Auto-created rule, WAN address, ****. So let's take a look at our firewall rules on the WAN, and we now have, here we go, Open VPN Home Wizard made 3 rules. It opened up that port 1194 on the WAN address for UDP and IPv4. This actually is a leftover rule from this 2091 is a leftover rule from when I had that port open. I can get rid of that. And then there's what looks like the same thing again. So this is probably also leftover. This is so it created one rule, but I've done this a couple times in this config, so it's created some redundancy. So I'm going to get rid of that. I don't see any differences between them. Okay, let's edit that rule really quick. So it's saying action pass, so don't block pass traffic on the WAN interface from the WAN interface on IPv4 UDP protocol, and match this 1194 port on both sides. Perfect. Save that. All right, I'll apply my changes here. So now the config is done, but now we need to program the client, which I'm using an iPhone, but when I was working on my dad's, I was using an Android because that's what he uses. And I got it working on both. And fortunately, pfSense comes through again and makes this really easy for us. You're going to want to go to System and then Package Manager. And in Package Manager, there is a package called Open VPN Client Export. You can see that listed under my installed packages. If you go over to Available Packages, a fairly long list will show up here of packages that are available. If you just type in Open, you'll find it's not listed here because I already have it installed, but you'll find it and just click on Install over on the right, and then it'll be installed for you. This is going to allow us to quickly export a config file, and then we can import that right into our device. All right, so if we click back, once you've installed that package, click back on VPN, go back to Open VPN, go to Client Export, I believe, and scroll down. And now you will see under the username Dustin, or your username, whatever you created, right? My home VPN certificate. I now have all these export options. And you can use this for Windows as well. You don't have to use it on mobile. So pick your flavor of choice here, what client you want, and go ahead and download it. If you are using a phone, I would recommend clicking on this Open VPN Connect iOS/Android button. So if I click on that, I'm going to have this OVPN file that I need to download, right? And it's got a big long name here. What I would recommend is download that to your computer, put it somewhere that you can get to securely, but from your phone. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. What I did was I uploaded it to my OneDrive, and then I went to my OneDrive app on my phone and downloaded it and imported it into the app. So if you are on Android, you're going to want the official Open VPN Connect SSL VPN client. I'm showing it here on my screen from Google Play Store. If you're on iOS, you're going to want the Open VPN client, again from Open VPN Technologies. They're both free. They both work great. And this is what they look like. We'll look at iOS here because it's got a nice picture of what's happening. I can't currently show my phone on my screen. When you click on that file inside your phone, depending on how your phone works, it's going to actually import it right. It's going to let you pick the app to import it into. I think on Android, you actually click on OVPN profile, and then you go and find out where you downloaded it from the file system. But once that's done, it kind of presents you with this entry that has a little button on it that slides from orange to green, orange when it's off and green when it's lit, when it's connected. So you will have to initially put in your password. So I'd put in Dustin, and then I'd put in my password, and because I keep my phone locked with a pin and thumbprint and all that, I don't mind storing my password in there. So I checked the box to save password, so I don't have to put in my password every time on this app. All I have to do when all that's put in is just tap that button. It goes green, and now I'm connected. And up in the upper left-hand corner of my phone, it says VPN. It lets me know that I'm connected. And by default, the normal traffic of your phone is still going to go out around. It's not going to use the VPN. It's called split tunnel. The only traffic going over the VPN is the traffic that the VPN, that the phone needs to get to your home resources. So the traffic that's on that 10.10.10 network. That's what we ended up doing. That's the only traffic that's going to go over that. If we went back to our server and edited that, I believe I saw originally a button in here somewhere. Yep, right here. Redirect IPv4 gateway. So force all client-generated IPv4 traffic through the tunnel. If we check this box, it's going to make, when you're connected to that VPN, it's going to make all traffic from your phone go through your home network. And that could be good. If you want to be more secure when you're out and about and you don't know what Wi-Fi you're on, if you're on a Starbucks or what have you, or in an airport especially, having everything your phone is doing routing through your home VPN being encrypted through that certificate, that 2048-bit certificate, is going to be actually really secure. It's probably going to be a little bit slower than if you just used whatever connection, because you're wrapping that internet connection in a VPN tunnel. It's going to make it a little bit slower, but it will be more secure. Maybe you want to set up a couple of these VPN tunnels, one just for cameras or some sort of security, security doorbells or what have you, so that you can get to them, but still have your normal phone functionality and speed. And then maybe another one that you turn on just when you want super high security, when you don't trust the wireless signal that you have. Really depends on how paranoid you want to be. I want to wrap this up talking about security. Security is something you really have to plan from the start. It does not work to add security at the end, right? Anytime you try to bolt security on, you're going to end up with more security holes than you expected. It's just not possible to add on security. Security has to be part of the plan. Don't take the easy way out, right? Don't try to just get it working and then figure out security later. Make security part of the initial plan. And be extra paranoid, right? Assume that your public network, whether you're at home or you are at work, is under attack, because they are. If you actually look at the logs of your external IP addresses, you're being attacked from IP addresses all over the country or all over the world, a lot that look suspiciously like China and Japan and Russia, because everybody is scanning the internet. Security researchers, white hats, black hats, gray hats, they're scanning the internet all the time just to see what's out there and what's available. So assume that if you open a port and that device has, some sort of weakness to it, that it's going to be found out, and you're going to get, people in your network that you did not want there. They're going to take control of things and be able to see your cameras, and that's the last thing that you really want. And unlock your front door, right? So all this home IoT stuff is awesome. Home automation is fantastic, but let's be thoughtful about this before we go and deploy every gadget that's out there. Let's make security part of the plan. And I know it's not going to be as easy as it would be if you just, followed the instructions and used their app and you went through their cloud, which is a whole nother problem, because now they can see all your data. Really think about, what you want to open up and what you want to allow. And in order to make it more secure, you're going to give up a little bit of convenience. But a lot of these IoT manufacturers don't consider security part of the product, right? They're just giving you a cool device. They just make it work. They don't have a vested interest in it being secure after the fact. That's it for today's episode. I want to hear from you. Questions about your education, career, technology, and ideas for future episodes, and feedback on this or previous episodes. You can send me emails, dustin@sysadminshow.com. Follow me on Twitter @sysadminshow. Until next time, I encourage you to never stop learning.